Thanks, Gary. Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. Just quickly, if you are a mother, could be a grandmother, but would you please stand, all the moms, just for a minute? All the moms. Just want to honor you. I don't know that there's a more important group that make up the body of Christ than the mothers. And what I want to share today is kind of in keeping what I've been talking about, but with the emphasis on mom. We've talked about how the disciple prays and how the disciple worships, how a disciple studies the Word, how a disciple shares the gospel. And 3 weeks ago, we talked about the motivation for sharing the gospel, which is the soul burden, the message, those 5 key words. Didn't mean to click that yet. Those 5 key words, and then today we're looking at a method and thinking about winning the next generation to Jesus, that as Christian parents, our number one concern should be raising Christian children. And I know that we want our kids to be successful, we want them to be responsible, and we want them to be, hopefully kept out of jail. We want good things for our children. But there's nothing greater than desiring for your kids to be Christian kids and Christian adults, that you raise Christian children. I'm fortunate that I come from a Christian family, and I know that everybody here didn't have the benefit of growing up in a Christian home. I know that's true. I know that some of you even now are living in a home where maybe dad is serving God, mom's not, or mom's serving God and dad's not, or you grew up in a broken home. I know that. I understand that, but I'm just saying that if you have a child or one or more, the greatest goal for that child is that they would one day call Jesus Christ their own personal Lord and Savior. And I don't think, some of you dads can disagree with me, but I don't think that anyone has the potential for leading the kids like mom does. Mom just has a tremendous influence over children, especially as they're younger in their formative years. But this morning I wanted to talk a little bit about raising kids. Now, one thing I learned when I was on the mission field, if you travel around the United States, you've got a definite advantage because you can use GPS here. But you get in some of those third world or developing countries and GPS doesn't work. A lot of roads don't even have names. So you try to put in the address of the place you're going to, and sometimes it's just impossible. I'm pretty sure you're not going to find the Google Earth guide driving around in his Prius down in Guyana or one of those, But I've seen them at McDonald's and stuff here, or you pass them on the interstate, and they're not going down on a back road to Bangladesh. I'm just telling you that driving in another country is a completely different experience. And so what you kind of have to do is you do have to look at a map and you have to figure out where you're going is, and then you have to figure out what direction that is. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just try to go in that direction by trial and error, where road's dead end or whatever. Back a whole different experience. You just do it by trial and error, and I think that's a good definition of parenting. I think that for those people who they read the book on parenting, and so they've got it all figured out, and they're going to raise their kid according to the book, and might work with the first kid, but then that second kid comes along, and you think, what is wrong with this kid? Because I figured it out with the first one, but this one just isn't at all like her. And then you think you've got to figure it out with the second one, then the third one comes along, if you have 3 or 4 or 5, and they're so different. So basically what you're doing is you're saying, I want my child to be a Christian adult someday, so you point in that direction, and by trial and error, you find your way, and hopefully you'll get there. My mom and dad were not educated people, but today, all 6 of myself and my siblings are living. 3 of us are pastors, and the other 3 are in church somewhere worshiping God. And so mom and dad did something right, or maybe they didn't do enough of the wrong things to upset that. But there's no guarantee, is there? No matter how you try to raise your kids, they have minds of their own, and there's no guarantee if you do these 5 things, your kids will automatically become Christians. But what I believe is, moms and dads, is that we can give them the equipment so that when they reach the age where they can receive Christ for themselves, they have not been confused by the hypocrisy of their parents. That is, that for us to live a Christian life on Sunday and then to go through the rest of the week like God doesn't even exist. And so kids see their Sunday mom and their Sunday dad, but then on Monday it's like they're totally different people. That's not going to cut it, because kids can see a phony quicker than anybody. And so what I want to say is, I believe that we can live in such a way that we don't confuse our kids, that we don't, say we believe one thing while we're doing another. And pardon me, today, I just got to tell you, I've had a crazy cold, and my brain isn't all that today, worse than even normal. So, but just hang with me. Hopefully something I say today will make sense. So, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5 is an awesome verse about this. So if you would turn there with me. This is my mama. That's my mama right there. Look at the expression on her face. That's because of my little brother. So this is my little brother Marty. And this is this fat kid with no neck. That's me there. And Mom was 40 when I was born. Look at that expression on her face. She was tired. She had 6 kids. I was 5. Marty was 6. So she was 40 when I was born. Then I had a little brother. So I thought, did you guys know anything about birth control? Then I thought, man, I'm so glad they didn't, because I wouldn't be here. 6 kids. And we're all in church, thank God. Here's the passage of scripture, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. Would you mind standing up, letting the blood, rush to your legs or whatever as you stand? And reading this, that the Apostle Paul is writing Timothy, the younger pastor, giving him advice about how to be a minister and trying to encourage him and help him. And he makes this incredible statement. He says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. So Loie, the grandma, there's the daughter. And if those little girls have faith in God, you've got a big role to play in it, right? Look at that again. Let's read it again. I'm reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded now lives in you also. Be seated. So what Paul's saying is, obviously, you have a sincere faith. You have a sincere faith, not a phony faith. It's not this thing you try to do. But you have a sincere faith. A sincere faith is without any form of hypocrisy. A sincere faith isn't a perfect faith, but the heart is perfectly desiring to please and obey God. And so Timothy's grandmother had a sincere heart that loved God and wanted to obey God, that loved Jesus. I just got to tell you, I didn't get to meet my mom's mom, really. She died when I was pretty young. I don't have really any memories of her. But my father said of his mother-in-law, he said, she loved me like my mom never could. And he said he would remember her saying, when somebody would start to say something ugly about somebody, that my grandmother would say, if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. And she lived by that. And so this faith that I have was in part handed down to me by a grandmother that I never had the great privilege of knowing, because I understand she was a wonderful, wonderful, godly lady. And then my little mama, see, because she was the first one to tell me about Jesus. She was the first one to read me Bible stories, because at night we didn't read Mother Goose or any of those other, whatever you read to your kids, I'm sure, to up their literacy or whatever. But Mom read to us from the Bible storybook at night before we went to bed. That, I'm getting ahead of my message, but she passed on her faith to all 6 of us. And I am a direct recipient of the faith of my mama. My dad was a Christian too, but my mother passed it on to me. I've watched my wife through the years, and she has a way of imparting her faith that the pastor dad really doesn't get, because she lives it out day in, day out, and it's just in the real things of, cleaning and making them make their own beds and teaching them to be responsible, but in all of that, doing it in an atmosphere of prayer and of the presence of Christ in our home. A sincere faith. I suppose that, if there's anything that I would want my kids to know, would be that for all my faults and failures, my love for Jesus is real. That I love him, and that my faith isn't just this way of getting things from God that I want. But my faith says that even when I don't get what I want, I love God because he first loved me. And that the cross is real, and that the empty tomb is real, because I saw the power of the blood of Jesus in the empty tomb in my parents, and first and foremost in my mama. Now, I know that a lot of you don't have that perfect mom, or you don't have that perfect situation. I know that there are many single parents, and of all of the single parent households, 82% are women. Not too long ago, we asked the football team, if you live in a home with a biological father and mother, hold up your hand. And out of those 100 plus boys, 3 of them held up their hands. So we see the disintegration of the home and the family. And none of us are going to be perfect, and none of us are going to, have it all together. But our goal should be to have strong Christian homes where our kids can come to know the Lord. How is that possible? And I want to talk a little bit about that. I know what I know about motherhood. You could write on a grain of rice with a magic marker. So I don't pretend to be the expert on what it means to be a mother, but how do you pass your faith on to your children? Well, in Ephesians chapter 4 and in 1 Peter chapter 3, there is one theme that's kind of discussed, and I want to share that with you. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1. Wives, respect and obey your husbands. Didn't I bless you? Respect and obey your husbands. I don't know, back about 10 years ago, I started having women say, "You're not going to make me say obey, are you, in the wedding discipline when they're going to get married?" No, we've kind of taken that out because of the negative connotation. But when you understand that Peter's talking about the spiritual authority that God has established in the world, and that as Christ is head of the church, the husband is head of the wife, and it has deep spiritual significance that I don't have the time to go into here, but ultimately, we men are pathetic creatures. We are rather insecure, and the way that we understand love is through the respect of our wives and our children. And sometimes we're not very respectful, but I do want to say that women, if you want your kids to know your faith is real, it has a lot to do with how you love your man. You don't have to say amen, it's true anyway. You see, kids get confusing messages when mom runs dad down or talks bad about it. Now, I know some of you are divorced, and but what I want to say is that I watched my daughter as she went through a very painful divorce, and I watched her never say anything negative about the man who left her with 2 children. She didn't say anything negative to her kids because she did not want to burden them with that. And plus, they are her children's father. It takes a lot of grace. I've got to tell you, I didn't have a lot good to say, and she would correct me a lot of times. "Dad, that's their dad, you know." And she'd have to help me out with that. And what I'm trying to say is that while your children, again, if you're married and you're raising your kids together, let me just go back to that. If you're married and you're raising your kids together, then your most important human relationship is not with your children, it's with your spouse. I'm going to say that again. That was so good, it bears repeating. Your most important human relationship is not the kids, it's the spouse. Now, I'm not saying that so that if you're divorced you feel like a failure. God knows my heart. I don't mean that in any way. But if 2 people are married, see, because sometimes people focus on the kids so much, they neglect the marriage relationship, and that hurts the kids. Okay? So moms can get so into the kids, or the dad can get so into the kids, that one day the kids grow up and move out, and mom and dad don't even know each other. You got to get in love and stay in love. You got to date each other. You got to, I mean, do you hear what I'm saying? The kids matter, but your spouse matters more. And I've seen a lot of hurting people. I know some hurting people who felt like they didn't matter because the kids were given such a high priority in the home. And so what I'm saying is, give your kids a high priority. Just give your spouse a higher priority. Because your kids will see that. And a home that doesn't do that is not healthy. I watched my mom one time. I thought she was going to beat somebody up. And those who know my mom couldn't imagine that. But our neighbor all of a sudden was knocking on our front door. This is a great story, by the way. I just set it up. It's a great story. Don't miss this. So our neighbor lady was knocking on the door. Mom went to the door, and she's always so sweet to everybody, but it was obvious that this woman was an angry woman. And so when Mom opened the door and said hello, she tore into my mother. She was cussing at her. And so apparently what had been happening was somebody had been climbing over her fence and bending it down. It was at the back of our property. And she just knew it was me and my little brother. Now, me and my little brother did some pretty bad stuff, but running down her fence wasn't one of them. So we were actually innocent this time. But she was going on about the hoodlums my mother was raising and what a horrible job she was doing. And then she said, and if your husband was a man, oh, you don't say that to my mom. I watched the veins pop out on her neck, and I watched her back stiffen. And she said, hold it right there. I'll tell you, my husband is a man. And me and my little brother were over in the other room going, yeah. Now, she hadn't defended us about climbing the fence. And she hadn't defended herself for the accusation this woman was bringing her. But you don't talk about my man like that. That spoke a lot to us as kids, how much my mom and dad loved each other. And the most important thing you can do for your kids is to love your husband, love your wife. I mean, get so mushy it makes them sick. And love each other. You want me to quit now? So just quickly, I realize that these 5 things we've been talking about, they are the key to winning your kids to the Lord. Mothers and dads, but specifically mothers today, you need to model prayer. The first person your kids will remember praying is you. Abraham Lincoln said of his mother, all that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. I remember my mother's prayers, and they have always followed me. They've clung to me all of my life. And I can remember my mom's simple little prayers and how she would talk to Jesus. When she died, I lost my #1 prayer warrior. And I know Debbie was #2, and she's picked that up. But my mom prayed for all of us. And she modeled prayer. And so we grew up thinking everybody prayed. We were shocked when we went to somebody's house, one of our friends, and they didn't pray before they ate. We thought they were the worst pagans in the world. How can you eat without praying first? That was just how it was in our home. Mom modeled prayer. And she modeled worship. She couldn't sing very well. But, you know, when I saw this picture, and some of you probably seen this little video, and this little girl is just lost, and she's in church, and they're worshiping, and she's just, and you know her mom modeled that, right? You know she saw her mom worshiping Jesus. Maybe it wouldn't be so hard for our kids to worship Jesus if they saw their mom and dad worshiping Christ. Not only at church, but in the home. We need to model what it means to worship. My mom couldn't sing very good. She would drive me crazy, but she would wake us up in the morning, and she would sing, I can't sing today, but rise, shine, give God the glory, glory, rise. She would sing that. I said, shut up, Mom. But she was giving God glory early in the morning. And it was real. Oh, worship your children. Worship God in front of your children. Talk about how much you love Jesus. Talk about how he saved you. I mean, worship the Lord in your home. And you need to give your children a biblical worldview, because the other worldview that they're getting is not good. And they need to understand that the Bible is important at home. Don't think that the church can provide all of your children's biblical training. We want to partner with parents so that that happens. We only have them an hour a week, and parents have them 40 hours a week. And so we want to help you, but you know, a big piece of what your children believe about God and the Bible is going to come from you. Teach your children the scriptures. Read the Bible to them. Get a Bible story book that's at their level. My little grandson, Isaac, kind of blew me away one day. He said, Poppy, I want to put an app on your phone. And I'm like, no way, because I use some dumb video game or something. He says, no, you'll like it. I said, okay, but if I don't like it, I'm going to delete it. He takes my phone, and he gives it back to me, and it is an app of video Bible stories. So these people are acting out the scriptures. And here's my grandson. He's saying, here's the way I would like to learn the scriptures. Did you know he had this? Yeah. I don't know how he did it. It's like, but you know, the kids appreciate the scriptures when they're taught in the right way. Sharing the gospel, and make sure that you talk about the cross, and let your children know they need to trust in Jesus too, and they need to give their hearts to Jesus too. And I know of at least 2 moms in this room right now that have won their own children, led their children to the Lord, to lead them to pray for Christ to come into their heart. And I mean, moms, you are going to have the greatest opportunity to do that with your kids. Sharing the gospel, carrying your cross, sharing the gospel with your kids. And then serving others. One thing I remember about my mom is our friends were her friends. My best friend, I won't name his name because this does go out to people, but his parents were going through a horrible divorce. They were fighting. He just didn't want to go home. And so he would stay at our house. Sometimes for a month at a time, he would stay at our house. He and I would go hunting. We would go hunting. We would go rabbit hunting. And we would bring back, you know, these bunnies, sorry, but we'd bring back these rabbits from hunting. And we would clean them and everything. And then my mom, she would make fried rabbit and biscuits and rabbit gravy. They're Kentucky folks. And for some reason, that guy felt like my mom was his mom. Again, they were going through a bad divorce. It was really hard for them. And our home became his second home. There's just something about serving other people and putting yourself second. Nothing speaks of your faith in Christ more than serving other people. And I keep bragging on my mom. She passed away a little over a year ago, and I got to officiate her funeral in a way. I mean, there's 3 pastors in our family. It's hard to get a word in edgewise, but they asked me to bring the message. And all of these things were so evident in my mother. I can't call my mom today, but some of you can. Some of you have a living mother, or you have, and I like what Pastor Paul said a while ago about if your mom's not here, adopt a mom. Get your picture taken with them out there. It means a lot. But if your mom is living, give her a call today. And I've got this little video so that it'll give you some ideas. Get your Kleenex ready. Here we go.
My mom is absolutely incredible.
I definitely would not be who I am or where I'm at today if it wasn't for her.
I'm thankful for her and that I love her more than I can express.
Just everything that she's done for me is so much a part of who I am today.
Call her on the phone?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I could do that.
I would definitely do that.
I'm gonna cry so hard.
I am just really happy that you're a part of my life and that you've been a huge mentor of mine.
And we couldn't have done it if it weren't for you being willing to sacrifice.
I just want you to know how much I love you. I never realized how much you did and how much you juggled until I had kids of my own.
I love you a lot, and that I appreciate everything you've done for me in life.
Thank you just for everything.
Stay with me, would you? You can do it, moms. You can win your kids to Jesus. Right now, as I look across this room, some of you have been part of this church a lot longer than I have. But I would challenge you, and maybe your mom is here. Would you go and tell your mom how much you love her and appreciate her, and then look for those people who have been mothers in your life, and give them a hug and tell them how much you appreciate them. And you might see somebody that's a total stranger. Go up to them and just say, "I'm so glad you're in church today," and give them a hug. And you know, I don't think you can show too much love to the moms. So would you do that? Make sure now, before you go, get your picture taken out there. with your real mom or with an adopted mom or with your wife, you share you with the next generation.